Being here tonight. To begin, we'll do a roll call. Councilman White here. Councilman Roosevelt here. There. Councilman Baird here. And Councilman Ryan here. And we're missing Councilman Allen. I kept thinking Councilman
Make sure you put that in the minutes, Nicole. Nicole.
There we go.
We've asked Councilman Baird to give us a prayer, and then following the prayer, you'd all stand and join me in the pledge of allegiance.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we're grateful for this day, and we're grateful for this opportunity we have to meet as a council tonight. We're grateful for those who are in attendance, and we're grateful for our community and those who serve in our community and in our nation. We ask you to please bless us tonight, that thy spirit may be among us to help us in making the right decisions for the city. We're grateful and ask thee to bless us with clear minds and good understanding of the issues at hand. We love you and say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Has everyone had a chance to go through the minutes of the last meeting? We have the regular meeting, and then I believe we have the minutes from the
Extra.
yeah, it says
Momentum meeting.
from the Momentum meeting, it says minutes of a regular council meeting, that should be pretty special.
Oh, yep, I see that. I will choose that right now.
And that meeting, and the special meeting, was only to discuss their contract. They needed water, they're doing a frac, and they purchased Newfield. And we had the old contract with Newfield, but we needed to update the contract with Roosevelt. And because of time, we held a special meeting, and that was approved in that meeting, just so the public's aware of what was going on.
Where did they access the water?
FCL's pit, which is Axel's
On top of
pit.
the hill.
Mhm. Any other corrections or amendments to the minutes?
I move we approve based on the one amendment.
I'll second it.
We have a motion by Councilman Roosevelt and a second by Councilman White. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. We have our comment period. Did you come to comment tonight, Carolyn?
No, I came to observe.
Okay. So we have our 15-minute comment period. Any person is able to come up and present themselves to the council and talk or speak for up to 3 minutes. Is there anyone in our audience that would like to do that tonight? It's not like they're in testimony or anything. All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move forward with our meeting. So our first item, we discussed at one of our last meetings, the need to change our ordinance, Title II, Chapter 4, which relates to city manager. And we had made some changes earlier on in the year and didn't really realize how that was going to affect the hire of our new city manager. And so with a little more thought and experience, we went back to that and made some modifications to that. And it is right there. Has everyone had an opportunity to read that?
You sent this final version out, or just with the agenda, right?
Yeah.
I'm reading it right now.
It was, the final version of this was sent out a week ago.
Okay.
There was, well, first of all, with the council, are there any concerns, questions, suggestions on that ordinance? It's basically, when we discussed it last time, we basically wrote it according to the understanding that I had from the council of how, what we wanted that to say. We did put the word contract back in the ordinance, as a may, so it gives us, it's a little more defined as far as instead of, can we have a contract, can we not have a contract, those types of things. It explicitly says we can and may, but it doesn't say we have to. So it gives us the option, which is a good, in my mind, I'd rather mention it and say that we may have a contract and not mention it at all.
Yeah.
Just because it gives us a little more latitude or a little more ground to stand on.
I like the way that's written.
There was one concern. I wish Melissa was here.
She's probably stuck in traffic between Duchesne and here.
Is she on her way?
Yeah, we talked to her this morning. She said she was gonna be here.
Okay. Well, maybe while you were kind of brushing over that then, let's go ahead and move on to the next item and give a little time for her to come, because there was some questions that you had, Scott, about how stringent it was for a for-cause termination. And one of his questions was employment policies. And so even if a time card wasn't submitted correctly, or if there was a decision to change the policy for an interim period for a special need or something like that, he just didn't want to be caught between a rock and a hard spot, and felt like that was, if it was a matter of conduct, ethics and morals, that's one thing, but just a simple decision like that, it was a little touchy. So we'll address that when Melissa comes.
I was just saying, are you talking about four?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we might.
Well, it would still be for the council to be able to.
Yeah, the council.
Because it says from office shall be considered for cause when the manager.
You're right.
So I don't.
But what's at stake with him is he's saying if it was the smallest of violations, which really didn't put the city in a poor spot or anything, he has the potential of losing his severance benefits over that, where that's could be a really frivolous thing. And so I get where he's coming from.
Do you mind if I add some stuff to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So another concern with that too is, so for instance, the pandemic that came out with COVID-19, a lot of city managers had to go contradictory to policy. And so there'll be times when the city manager has to contradict policy to protect the organization or an employee. The city policy also allows for some of that to take place with Roosevelt City. So that would be my concern is, here I have to make something like that. I just don't want that to affect possibly a severance.
Okay, now Melissa,
Hi, sorry.
you're on the spot.
There's like a lot of road construction.
Says no
Train.
there's traffic.
Like I was in LA or something, trying to get somewhere.
So we're talking about the ordinance.
Okay, great.
Scott had a concern, the only thing he had a concern with is A, well, it's actually two, let's go to the actual, 204060A, 4. And so can you explain your concern to Melissa again? Sorry, Scott.
Yeah, so Melissa, so on that, city manager generally will make overriding decisions with policy. So like for the pandemic, if they need to change an employee schedule or they need to do something different that is in policy, city managers do that quite a bit
Okay.
in regards to policy. I just don't want, if I was to do something like that, to say, it wouldn't say like this council, but a council down the road, maybe nitpick and say, hey, you violated policy by doing this. So therefore, you don't get your severance.
Yeah. So what I'm wondering is, when we were talking about that, the understanding of the feeling was for something that would bring
Irreparable harm.
yeah, to the city,
Right.
right? And that was more the code of conduct, like the, obviously, and I don't know what's in our policy as far as like sexual harassment and those types of things, but those types of things.
Right.
So is there a way to define that out a little more or reword that just a little bit to where it mitigates his concern, but it still keeps the intent?
Yeah, reword it in the ordinance.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm just wondering, as far as our policies go, he's just, so I read through those policies, and you have a copy of those with you by chance, you sent them to me, didn't you?
yeah, I can pull it up. I don't have a paper copy if that's what you're asking, but I have an electronic copy.
Yeah, and I think I do too. So let's look that up and just,
Is there a way to pull that up on the?
Is that the most recent revision that we have? We have one.
I believe so. It's on your website.
Code of conduct would refer more to like sexual harassment and things like that, wouldn't it?
mhm.
So if we specify a specific part of the policy that, which we have, and that is clearly laid out code of conduct, and he's agreeable to that, then there we go.
Well, and I guess what I'm asking is, what is it referred to in our policy? I don't know that it's code of conduct. Is there a certain area of our policy that we can refer to?
Well, I mean, it depends because the chapters are broken. I mean, like you've got your drug and alcohol, that's a chapter. So that would obviously apply in this
Right.
case, right? And then sexual harassment, employee conduct.
So there is conduct.
So probably those three sections
Mhm.
is what the intent was, right?
Mhm,
Would
yes.
include those three sections. So we could line that out in the ordinance and say, right, specifically section 3, 4, and 5
Yeah, so
of the personnel manual.
instead of just in general putting and employment policies, we put fails to comply with Roosevelt City's code of conduct, referenced as this.
We could say regarding alcohol use, sexual harassment, and something else too.
What part of the ordinance?
That's the last one right there.
What part of the ordinance are we looking at?
Sorry, I was just trying to read the part that you were having concern with.
Oh, it's A, number 4. And so
Okay.
it generalizes all policies. And what he's saying is that he just changed
But why don't we just, oh, sorry.
or,
Sorry, say your concern again.
So the problem with this is it's so general. So say I was to turn a time card in 2 days late, they could technically come back and say you violated this policy. So your severance, this is just being really nitpicky.
Sure,
It's now in jeopardy.
okay.
So, or for instance, city
I would
managers
just
do
put
go
referenced in.
contradict policy on certain areas sometimes.
Right,
And that's just my concern, where they could use that the way it's written to come back and say, hey, you're gonna lose your severance because on this day you did this, or you didn't turn your time card in on time and it was 2 days late.
Well, I would say an easy fix for that is for you to read this and tell us which part of that you don't like or seems too vague. Because a lot of these, I mean, if I'm reading privileged information, an employee who possesses information serving a public interest, I mean, that's an important part.
Yeah, all of that, the employee code of conduct is definitely included. So what we were looking at is more things that would bring irreparable harm to the city, like,
oh, sorry, I didn't interrupt you.
and maybe we're getting too in the weeds.
Maybe, so I'm wondering if we just actually added verbiage, regarding, also following policy when it comes to the disciplinary action, right? So like the policy is pretty clear on what's terminable and what's not, right? If you don't turn in a time card, you may be subject to a verbal written warning or something like that, right? So if we say that, if we can get that in the ordinance, it's just that he's gotta follow that process.
Personally, it would.
No, well, and
And so that's some of the problem too, because in reality, the way your
well, we as the
policy.
council would.
Yeah.
What Melissa is saying is that he would go through the same grievance process as a normal employee in the sense that 3 and done or whatever. However, Grant's feeling and the general feeling is that there's a difference between a employee of the city and this position per se. It's an at-will, 100% at-will position. And so Grant was very careful not to add in the grievance process into the city, that position.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not referring so much to the grievance process, but that, that compliance issues would be treated the same or equal to an employee. Like what an employee might get written up for, he could only get written up for if if he did a minor infraction of policy violation, it would not be terminable for him, like it would not be for anybody else.
Yeah, and I get that, and.
But we
so-
can also specify different parts of the policy. I don't think there are parts of the manual, and I'm kind of agreeing maybe with what Vince said, is that like in saying that you would violate a time card deadline and get fired, that it's all pretty,
But because he's not afforded the same due process as other employees,
right,
technically they could let him go for cause, and then he would be out all of his benefits and everything. Because, and Grant was very specific that he felt strongly not to do that, not.
sure.
So, my feeling is maybe we just put fails to comply with Roosevelt City's Code of Conduct.
That's what provided in.
Yeah, as provided in the employment policies, or it could be worded fails to comply with Roosevelt City Code of Conduct,
The sections of
which action would bring an irreparable harm to the city or something.
Yeah,
like
that's
that.
good. I
You know what I
agree with
mean?
that. Sure, yeah.
I agree with that.
Well, I would think it needs to be section 1, needs to be section 2, because you're doing most of the hiring, right?
Well,
Technically.
I have final approval, but a lot of your department heads and managers will be doing that, generally doing those types of processes. I would have the final say on the hiring process. Would that be?
Yep, you, the city manager signs.
The biggest thing is we just don't want the city to get a black eye.
Yeah.
And if we do, we want to be able to get rid of the guy who got us a black eye without paying him 60 grand. And no, I mean, this
No.
is very, you know what I mean, that's how it is. So to me, there's a lot of this stuff in there that I know already that isn't being done properly. There's,
Oh,
you know what I'm
yes, sir.
saying? Yeah, so, and so if I were to be really nitpicky, I'd be like, you know what? You're out. Like, and that's
Yeah,
without giving any. And so I guess is there, I don't know. I don't want to get too hung up on this. It's got to be pretty simple, but
Like, what if we put something like there, fails to comply with Roosevelt City Code of Conduct and is, well,
well, the code of conduct really explains what we're talking about, right? Because the code of conduct,
okay, yeah, professionalism, for instance, and yeah,
privileged information,
that makes sense, yeah.
Why is employment policies even listed on?
That's what I was
it
wondering.
was just a general, yeah, and I don't think it needs to be listed on there. So go down after gifts and gratuities.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's
Keep going.
I was gonna say the
Keep
same
going.
thing.
Because if that's not there, we're finished,
Keep
right?
going.
Well, it seems to me, if you take out the employment policies and you just fail to comply with Roosevelt City's Code of Conduct.
Yeah, I'm even fine if you omit that last and just says.
Because this is all underneath the,
Or causes, harm to an employee or the city, you know, in that.
significant harm.
Sorry.
yeah, so that's all in section 4. What about where's the alcohol, drug and alcohol use? Because everything that I'm looking at, that I'm concerned about is in section 4.
Section 3 is alcohol.
Section 4 and section 5.
section 3 is alcohol and drug,
So that's what I'm
4,
saying.
sexual
Almost all of them
harassment.
apply.
5, employee code of conduct. So I think that he should,
3, 4, and 5.
3, 4, and 5, right?
So Melissa, would it take, if we take out the employment policies and just fails to comply with Roosevelt City's Code of Conduct,
Reference. in
referencing whatever you want to
3,
reference?
4, and
Section
5.
3, 4,
What
and
if,
5.
what if you just said, fails to comply with Roosevelt City Code of Conduct, which results in harm to the city or something like that?
But you guys realize the Code of Conduct is just section
3, 4, and 5.
5, just section 5.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So that would be confusing.
Yeah.
So
we
he's
could
not,
do-
he's not
True.
subject to sex, gender, and harassment. I would say just take out the Code of Conduct and
Well, let's just do this. Fails to comply with Roosevelt City's Code of Conduct and employment policies referenced in 3, 4, and 5.
Sections 3, 4, and 5.
Because that,
Which, by the way, are the only sections of your policy that outline bad behavior that would be terminable for any employee.
Exactly my point. Because if
So,
there's just a mistake that's made, that's what he's saying. If there's a mistake made, I don't know.
right, but,
Like, okay, there's a mistake and then there's a mistake, right?
right.
You
But
know
all,
what I'm saying?
but all the mistakes that could happen are in 3, 4, and 5. So if you lump the whole policy together, there's nothing outside of that, but the way it's written right now, there's nothing outside of 3, 4, and 5 that he could accidentally do, and it could get
Yeah.
interpreted funky, and then he gets fired,
Right,
right?
so no other, if anything that was, anyone violated in any other section would probably just be a disciplinary type thing.
Well, and
I think in
there's
the sense
nothing
that
to
just a-
violate in the other sections. I mean, it's talking about employee compensation and reporting a workplace injury, how
Yeah, see,
termination of
which is-
employment goes.
that's-
It's not behavioral based.
Okay,
Does
and
that
that's what
make
we're
sense?
looking at as behavioral based.
Yeah, so 3, 4, and 5 covers all the behavioral based, and if you take all of the other stuff too, none of that would be it has violations in it. Does that make sense,
So-
what I'm trying to say?
Yes, and that's why I'm glad you're here, because that's what I wanted to narrow down,
Yeah.
just that. So fails to comply with Roosevelt City Code of Conduct and employment policies referenced in sections 3, 4, and 5. And I think we're done.
Do you understand what she's saying? Section 1, if you apply that, if he violated section 1, there's no provision in section 1 for disciplinary action.
I know.
Or section 2.
However, but the thing is, the way this is written, if it's in general, he, because he is different than another employee, would be able, there would be action be able to be taken against him that wouldn't normally be.
Well, so either way is fine, but what I'm saying is that if you include every section, all those outside of 3, 4, and 5 are outlining like more procedure than policy.
Right.
So there's no, like this talks, like one of them talks about how family medical leave works. Like there's no,
What if he doesn't follow the process of how family medical leave works?
Because
He
this,
didn't
Well, but
follow
that-
city policy. and-
well, but the policy doesn't talk about I mean, there's nothing in the policy manual that says like, if you don't employee fill out your FMLA paper, they're gonna get fired.
here's the
The city
problem.
council could interpret it.
Okay,
Let me tell
if
you.
they're crazy.
Well, no,
I can see.
Let me just read this again, because it does make sense if you just read that small paragraph. It shall be considered for cause if he fails to comply with Roosevelt City's Code of Conduct and employment policies. It doesn't specify, so any policy that's in there, even if it's a procedural thing,
Mm-hmm.
could technically be interpreted as for cause termination.
Then you lose the sense.
That's what he's saying.
Okay,
And that's why we want to section out the 3, 4, and 5, because that's really the ones that we're
so
concerned
you care
about.
about.
And the other ones we need to leave out, because then in the future, some crazy person couldn't say, well, you didn't follow this procedure
Okay,
and you're gone.
I see what you're saying.
Exactly, I mean, that could be with any type of thing, you know, say I changed somebody's schedule to something that completely different that's in policy because it was something that needed to be happening for the family and I'm doing it for their good. And city managers have a tendency to contradict policy every now and then for the safety of the city and or an employee. So I just don't want that, hey, I've got to wait a two. If I've got to make adjustments for this individual as an employee and go against policy, but it may cause, I may lose my severance over it. I don't want to have to be.
And your job?
Yeah, and my job, I don't want to have to wait a two. So.
Well, let's just war game it though, and I'm not.
No, you don't. You're good.
So we need to think about some scenarios. So let's say he doesn't come to work for 3 weeks. Could, you guys, let's say he doesn't come to work for 3 weeks. He just doesn't show up as city manager. We can't release him. What policy could we use to release him without cause? We'd have to let him go with
Ask her.
$50,000.
Ask her.
Well,
He doesn't show up.
if we leave
Well, wait,
those
wait.
sections out, make him not.
So actually-
Because there's a law, state law, that says if you don't show up to work for a certain amount of time, it's an automatic termination. You voluntarily quitted at that point.
In this certain situation, the circumstance you're giving me, attendance is covered in section 5, employee code of conduct. So you'd be okay. You'd be covered in that circumstance. And that's what I was trying to say before, is that I don't think, and I don't want to say with 100% certainty, but I'm 90% sure that there is nothing else in this policy manual that, unless you're really stretching, would be an issue, would be like,
Justification for cause.
yeah, would be terminable. They're like, it talks about like how you choose your salaries and what holidays you get paid and how vacation accrues, and things like that, right?
And
Which are unrelated to employment conduct or.
And when I talk about this, I'm not talking about you specifically, I'm talking about the next city manager, the city
No, for
manager
sure.
after that.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
And what
Sorry.
give me just one sec. What I'm doing here, honestly, is I'm taking your information and I'm comparing it with what the city attorney has said, and then I have to because you're absolutely right. 99.9% of the time, that wouldn't be an issue.
Right.
If we just do reference the 3, 4, and 5, it's 100% sure it would never be an
However
issue.
you want to write it, sir, it's good.
And the reason being because Grant already specified, and it's even written in this ordinance, that the same disciplinary action or what would you call it, procedure is not
Is not
applicable.
applicable, that's correct.
And so what you're saying is for those smaller things, well, there's disciplinary actions that take place, and there's a process and escalation that says, okay, you start at this, it's a verbal warning, then it's a written warning, and then it's termination, right? If you just don't get it right. Well, he's not afforded that. And so there's no, because he's not afforded that, they could fire him over the first offense and not even give him a verbal warning,
Mm-hmm.
and he'd lose
Right.
all the benefits and everything. So because that's the way the attorney wrote it in, I feel that's why we have to be a little more specific.
Sure.
Otherwise, I agree 100%, it would just be in general. If you got the same grievance process that all the other employees got, then I would say leave it how it is. I think we're really way too hung up on this, and I don't think it's that big of a deal. Those 3 sections, to me, I'm 100% confident that covers what we were wanting anyway.
I agree. Going with the policy, there's nothing else in there that we're missing by not including that is going to put you in a bad position later.
Okay. So,
The one thing I was gonna say, just to, if you don't mind me speaking for a sec, city manager is such a political position that really unreasonable things happen all the time that could, like, for instance, what we see happening at a national level, you can take the simplest, littlest thing and then you can use it to really, if it wasn't a political position, this wouldn't be such a big deal, but a council could come in and really not want them here, but not want to pay the severance, and they could really stretch it. So if it wasn't political, it wouldn't be a problem, but I think where it is, we gotta be real careful.
No, I think that's good.
That's how I felt, so.
okay, that's good discussion. I appreciate everybody's comments and input. Are there any other questions or concerns about the ordinance in general? Seeing none, would entertain a motion.
We actually have to do a public hearing there.
Public hearing.
We are in a public hearing for this ordinance.
I saw that on there and I'm like,
Yep.
that's why we did it this way anyway, huh? We could have technically approved this without a public hearing. I know that's shocking to a lot of people. But we chose to do this way to have the public hearing. And so now that we've gotten this discussion now, is there anything that the public would like to discuss? We'll go ahead and consider ourselves in a public hearing and would entertain comment from those in the public that have not commented yet. I'm just kidding.
Thanks, Lee.
Yeah, thanks for keeping it straight.
Actually, you mind if I say something?
Go ahead, yeah.
I'll come back. I just want to say thank you to the council for working through these issues. I know it can be really tedious, but thank you for the willingness to work through this so we can get this to, be resolved. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Okay. Any others? Seeing none, we'll end the public hearing and consider ourselves back in to open session, regular session. And now we'd entertain a motion.
I move we approve with the amendment to A4 on 2.04.060, whatever, the wording that you put, Mayor, on with reference to sections 3, 4, 5 of the city policy.
So that would read, fails to comply with Roosevelt City's Code of Conduct and employment policies referenced in sections 3, 4, and 5. Is that correct?
Yes, that's my motion.
So we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a second by Councilman White. Let's do a roll call vote. Councilman White,
Aye.
Councilman Busenbark,
Aye.
Councilman Baird, and Councilman Reimer.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
I just figured the next council, they'll come in and say, what were they thinking? And I'll fix it and do something different. Right? Because legalese is, I mean, we're working really hard here. We're trying to cover our bases, but legalese is legalese, and someone's gonna, just like we tried to fix this one and found our issues, I just think the next council over there are gonna come in and say, what were those guys thinking?
Could be.
So are we doing a contract then with him? So it'll be this contract and we can.
Well, and we're gonna discuss that tonight.
Okay.
And we crunched time a little bit and got it done. So it's available tonight. We'll go through the whole thing with the public and with the council. It's about 9 pages long. So brace yourselves. I'm just kidding. It's not that long.
I don't teach till 8, I'm good.
Now, we're gonna be out of here before then. So let's move on to the next one, airport board appointments. So we have had a few that have shown interest in being on that board. Not as many as we would have liked, but we do have enough to have 7 on the board if they're approved tonight. And so we have Hunter Webb. He's a pilot. He lives up in the upper country area. Colton Roberts is a pilot and mechanic, also living up in that area. Clyde Stansfield has showed some interest. He's an employee, but has showed some interest and has been on the airport board in the past. Sean Denver currently is working at the airport, well, not at the airport, but taking care of a lot of the things at the airport, and thought it would be proper to have him on that board. Vince Riley as a councilman on that board, myself, where we're both assigned to that board, we might as well continue those roles there. And then we have Chris Oakes that lives in Stonegate, that is a Roosevelt City resident, also interested in that position. We have 1 or 2 others that had shown some interest in speaking with them and trying to get back with them. They just they were almost non-responsive after their initial inquiry. So those were the 7 that I would present to the council for appointment tonight.
Are there any reservations? I know most of them. I don't personally have reservations. I don't know if anyone else does.
Yeah, so,
There's at least 3 of those not city residents, but
2.
they work in.
Oh, that's
Clyde
right.
is not a city resident.
He lives in Alpha.
The ruling was you had to have more.
We can have 3 as long as it's a full board.
Right. And you have 7, which is a full board, right?
We do, but we can have 2
Total max.
if it's a full board.
So one of those won't be able to. See, we get ourselves
Well,
in trouble all the time.
Let's do this. What we'll do then is we'll appoint Colton Roberts, Clyde Stansfield, Sean Denver, Vince Riley, J.R. Bird, and Chris Oakes. And then at some point in time, if we can look at that and address that, then we'll add Hunter Webb, and if not, we'll leave it how it is. But let's move forward with those. No, that ain't gonna work either.
You can only have 1.
Yeah, you can't have one unless it's full.
Let's do this.
Third try is a charm.
Let's do Colton Roberts, Clyde Stansfield. No, can't do that. Colton Roberts, Sean Denver, Vince Riley, J.R. Bird, and Chris Oakes. And then we'll add Hunter Webb and Clyde Stansfield, because maybe we could put a provision, if they work
For the city.
for the city, then.
I wondered if we had talked about that already, but it's obviously not.
So let's do those 5 for now. We'll hold on the other 2. We'll look at that again and see if that's something that we want to look at. And if it is, then we can add those 2 later. But this will give us an opportunity to get started with the board. There are some things that we need to get going on out there. So any questions or concerns with those individuals? Besides Vince?
I would say the mayor more than Vince, but.
Oh, yeah, I would agree with that. I wasn't going to throw myself in it.
I move we approve the 5 at this time and look at the ordinance later.
Okay,
I'll second.
got a motion and a second by Councilman Riley. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll appoint those 5. I'll get in contact with those that aren't here tonight. Next is the city manager contract. You have that where you can pull it up, Kurt. And we appreciate Kurt being here tonight in place of Ryan. Doing a good job. So,
That's the ordinance, not the contract.
Yeah.
What we're looking at.
and already in the contract, there's verbiage similar to the ordinance that we just changed, just a little short spot. And so we'll probably have to change the contract to match the ordinance, but it'll be a simple amendment.
Just referencing the.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, whereas, which is, we can kind of go past that. Says, gosh, I'm sorry. That's okay. I'm fast, but I'm not that fast. Okay, let's go up just a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, Kurt. So, yeah, do you guys want to read those whereases? I think the biggest one is the bottom, whereas it is the desire of the city to secure and retain the services of Finlayson and to provide inducement for him to remain in such employment and to make possible forward productivity by assuring peace of mind with respect to future security and to act as a deterrent against malfeasance or dishonesty for personal gain on the part of Finlayson. And that's why I'm glad we specified those parts of that employee policy. To provide a just means for terminating the services of Finlayson should he become unable to fully discharge his duties or when the city may desire to otherwise terminate his employment. There. Now, therefore, powers and duties are specified in the ordinance 2024-37, which Scott, I think you probably have looked at. In that ordinance, it specifies what your powers and duties are, what your relationship is to the mayor and council, and those types of things. The term shall serve without specific term at the will and pleasure of the mayor and council. It just basically specifies there is no, sometimes a 3-year contract, and this is just an indefinite term contract. Citizens' employment may be terminated at any time without cause by majority vote of the governing body, including the mayor, on the condition that the city compensates Finlayson in the form of severance at the rate of $9,500 per month for 6 months following the date of termination. And then it goes on, unemployment may be terminated at any time for cause by a majority vote of the governing body, including the mayor, and upon written notice to Finlayson. Removal from office shall be considered for cause when the manager, and then we just went through that. And it just specifies exactly the same verbiage as our ordinance. But I would suggest that we change 4 again, fails to comply with Roosevelt City's code of conduct and employment policies referenced in sections 3, 4, and 5.
We do this.
And then it says if he's terminated for cause, then the city shall have no obligation to pay any further salary or benefits, including severance benefits, except for any benefits that have been accrued and to which he is legally entitled to receive, such as accrued vacation, sick leave, and holidays. Are you okay with that?
Sorry, I got lost in here. They have made some changes to that.
Okay. Because there's 2 places that it references that.
Oh, right, so, vacation leave is not a legal entitlement, it's a policy entitlement.
Okay.
So I don't know if you wanna change that. Grant didn't, so maybe it doesn't matter. And also holidays just need taken out.
Okay.
Cause we don't owe you holidays, you get paid them if you're working during the holiday, right? I know.
That's ridiculous.
So I think you could just take holiday out, I mean, if you wanna leave the rest, but holiday is just not applicable.
What do we normally do if it, now, I know in our policy it says if an employee quits and gives 2 weeks notice, then they're entitled to sick leave and vacation pay or something like that.
If they're terminated for cause, then,
Do they get any of that?
it says that it's up to the discretion of the city manager, so,
I would be at the discretion of the council, because if it's something like, if it's something pretty major, I'd be like, dude, we don't owe you a dime.
yeah.
But if it's,
I would agree with that. If I committed a felony or something like that,
So
the city should have no entitlement to pay me anything.
yeah.
If you wear a University of Utah shirt, I think that should apply too.
However,
Well, that would never happen with me, so I'm
so
completely comfortable.
on the, for cause, I would say remove it all. Like the accrued vacation, sick leave, and all of that. However, if he voluntarily quits and gives us 30 days notice, then I do think that would be something that would be appropriate.
We can even take out such as accrued vacation and sick leave, because such as just mean, is just an example.
So you want to take out that entire paragraph?
No, because it should be a period after Finlandson, right there.
Yeah.
And then everything else should
Should
be
just come out.
white.
And there's another one later.
Now, yeah, and it's in 3, but that's if he voluntarily quits.
Yeah, so in my revision, I had said something like is entitled
Holidays.
to, I don't know what to say, entitled to benefits as stated in the Roosevelt City Personnel Manual,
That's fine.
because that specifies your sick accrual, your vacation accrual.
Let's see.
Okay, so it'd be like, Finlayson may otherwise be legally, be entitled to any benefits
Specified
specified.
in the or stated in the Roosevelt City Personnel Manual. Is that okay? Something like that, okay. So take out legally, so just be entitled to.
As defined in policy or
Yeah,
something?
perfect.
To
Benefit.
benefits, no, but you would have to say,
But they're all paid, so I would do, paid time off benefits or vacation and sick benefits as
specify.
defined in,
There you go.
yeah.
I'm not a lawyer.
And including, we'll go to,
I don't want to read all that stuff.
Take out
the reason we're having
holidays.
to do this is because our attorney didn't have time, so I did this. We can get it
We
done.
take out holiday again too, right?
I'm not an attorney either, this will be a little more
That's what I'm
knowledge.
Like I said, that's why I'm not,
I was impressed that he emailed that today, actually, with what he's got going on.
But, yeah, because I got it as far as I did,
Yeah,
and then there
great.
were 2 questions that I had, and then I wanted you to look over and make
Yeah.
sure. And it's coming together, it really is.
Yeah, that's great. I was impressed by you.
And yeah, this can be changed really any time that both parties agreement. So if we find something in here that you don't like or I don't like,
Yeah.
I'm more than willing to work through this and
It's-
clean it up some more if we need to down the road.
It's pretty good, because what we did is we took, so we had a really bad contract with the city manager. Well, I should say, it wasn't the city manager's fault per se, but it was not a very good contract.
Including.
But prior to that, we had some decent ones. And this is one of the decent ones that were like, oh, this makes total sense. Let's just work on that. And so it's pretty, I mean, it's tried and true. So it's pretty good. Let's see. In the event. Except for, others may otherwise be entitled to such as, I put, such as vacation and sick leave benefits as defined in.
Entitled to such as?
Entitled to.
Benefits to the
Be entitled,
vacation and leave.
well, see, it doesn't make sense because to Finlayson, except. And there shouldn't be a period after Finlayson in there. Should be a comma. Except for item Finlayson may otherwise be
You guys heading back
entitled
tonight?
to
Such
such as vacation
Oh, I gotcha.
and sick leave benefits. And Lee, you're the word expert. Come on, chime in here. What would you
laugh at that?
Yes, they're just like, yes.
I'm not laughing at you, you're fine. I think the way that you have it now, after working on it, I think that's a good sentence, yeah. Let's see.
I don't like as and has, but that's very simple. That's,
As long as it doesn't change the meaning of it, I'm good. Let's just move on.
okay.
Okay, yeah.
What were your
Do you
thoughts?
need to specify vacation and sick leave benefits, or can you just say,
Yes.
except for items Finlayson may otherwise be entitled to as defined in Roosevelt City policies and procedures?
No, because,
It's specifically those benefits?
correct.
Okay, then yeah, it's fine.
Let's keep it like that then. Salary, we agreed in the past, 110,000 to start. Then in 6 months following hire date, Finlayson will be eligible for a 5,000 annual salary increase based on performance. Thereafter, Finlayson may be considered for cost of living increases and or merit increases beginning June of 2022. This is exactly what we took out of your thing and continuing therefrom during the budgetary process when other city employees' compensation is being considered. Does that all make sense to everyone? So this is just talking about sick leave bit. Yeah, so maybe it does reference it right there, I don't know, but I'm not changing anything. This is basically just saying, as per your, letter, you know, all the other benefits that other employees enjoy, that's just specifying that in that paragraph, so. Vacation, sick leave, retirement contributions, holidays, health and life insurance, and other fringe benefits and working conditions as they now exist or hereafter may exist. Also shall apply to Finlayson as they do with other department heads of the city. Any policy calling for city manager's approval for any department head must be approved by the city council prior to said policy being applied to Finlayson. Okay. Vacation, that specifies your 2 weeks. Vacation will accrue just like everybody else's, except for you will begin with 80 hours vacation pay.
Thank you.
And then just talks about professional development will be at the cost of the city. If you're going on these manager conferences and those types of things, that'll be cost of the city, which is a normal thing.
Who approves those? Just out of curiosity.
They should be approved in the budget. There should be a budgetary item for.
Yeah, there should be a training budget for administration.
So as long as you don't
Exceed that.
exceed that.
The process for spending money is, has to be approved through that process as well, right?
It's just like with any employee who have to go to training, whether it's Ryan or Kirby, or this has to go through a process, right?
Yeah, out-of-pocket expenses kind of relates to that same, any job-related expenditures and stuff for it. When approved, budget will be reimbursed. Vehicle privileges, this talks about the policy that was created for department heads. You know, they can use a city car, they can purchase their own car and get a stipend. So that's basically, it just says, you'll be entitled to the same benefits afforded department heads and other appointed positions, according to city policy.
That's fair.
Liability insurance will be covered by the city. And then general provisions, so this agreement shall pass through. So that's basically it.
May I ask one question on this portion of it? Did you ever check on the bonding?
Yeah, and it's part of, and I can forward you the email. I talked to Jill Johnson at the trust, and she said that it is, and it's part of the property policy that the city maintains, and it's up to $5 million as part of the property policy.
Okay, sweet, thank you.
Are there any other questions, suggestions, thoughts on that? I think it covered very well what Scott had mentioned. I think it covers very well what we have discussed. Any other thoughts on that? I like it if Scott likes it. Are you okay with that?
Yes, I think it's very well done. I think it protects both interests on both
Hey,
sides.
for 45 minutes, that's pretty awesome. So, okay, if no other discussion on that, would entertain a motion. A motion to approve the contract with the city manager stuff. Okay.
With the adjustments, right?
The adjustments to, yeah, that we've made. Would you mind, as part of your motions, just putting subject to legal counsel review?
Yeah, okay, that's,
Subject to legal counsel review.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion by Councilman Baird and a second by Councilman Roosevelt. Roll call, Councilman White. Aye. Councilman Roosevelt.
Aye.
Councilman Baird. Aye. And Councilman Riley. Aye. Unanimous. So that means you're hired. Finally.
Thank you.
And your wife is smiling, so that's gotta be a good sign.
I'm smiling finally.
So that'll be good. So welcome and thanks for being patient with us, and I'm glad we got through that. We're excited to have you on board as part of the team, and there's plenty of work to be done. So we're ready to start, divvying that up.
Ryan, thanks to council.
Oh, is he watching? I better not say anything. There might be other people watching.
And he probably has a stack on his desk like this big, ready to walk in.
Well,
He already moved it.
It's in hiding.
We're both excited to have one person because we're both, I know he's stretched thin. I know I'm stretched a little thin, so it'll be nice to have one more person packing that weight, so. And then Friday, I don't think it matters, as long as that's signed and done, we'll have the attorney look at it probably first thing tomorrow. If he's okay with it, I'll sign it, we'll get you a copy, have you sign it, and then you can work out. Does the council have any concern with Scott coming on Friday and starting then?
And we'll work, Scott, to get computer access, everything, but that may take a few days.
That'll be fine. And then Monday I'll be on, I just got some things to finish up in Utah County, and then I'll probably be out here Monday afternoon around noon.
Okay. Remember the attendance policy.
I think you've already spoke to my references. I'm right there ordering me to go home.
Yeah.
It's the other way around.
Good deal. Well, this is kind of an interim meeting. We are still gonna have our meeting the third week of this month. There is one thing tomorrow, that there's a final walkthrough for the airport tomorrow at 1 o'clock. As for any councilman that wanna go to that.
I can't be there then, I don't want to go.
So I spoke to Kimberly today. She'd like to get an idea of how many will be in it.
I'll be there for sure.
And we'll just meet here,
Okay.
at least before the chief mentioned.
I may try to go if I remember.
I can shoot everyone a text tomorrow at 10 o'clock.
I can't,
I'll just have to come dressed in my work.
time closed. They're having a test tomorrow, so I definitely better be there. I'm sure they would be glad if I wasn't.
Do you teach statistics as well?
I can, I don't, I have, but I don't right now.
So do you have anything pressing for us, Kurt?
Actually, the purchase orders, there are a couple that we need to have approved for sure. The Staker Parsons,
We'll approve it.
I have a couple of questions on them as always, because I'm the numbers guy.
Let's go ahead and talk about that now.
Sorry, where was the straight stripe painting working at, Kirby? They were doing crack seal, part in the mark apron. and-
That's at the airport, that's another.
Oh, that's the
they-
airport
they-
one?
reservation.
Okay, I just didn't understand, because most of them say airport or something, and that one didn't. But I guess TWI probably stands for
Taxiway.
taxiway, okay, I just didn't think about that. I noticed we're purchasing, more gas and fuel, which is fine. Is that gonna be now a monthly thing that we're going to be doing?
I hope we do, because if it is, we're
That
making
means we're
good
set,
money.
right, that's what I'm not concerned about, other than it's more than last month, but last month was new, this month we did it again, which tells me we're getting used, which is what we want, right? Because we
Yeah.
pay,
Gas last month?
yeah,
The tank was pretty empty, so we filled a smaller amount last month, and this brought it more in line with where it should be.
yeah, because we have on there like
Those
20,
tanks, the less condensation and water will have.
yeah, we had 25,000 last month from Ascent Aviation and I don't remember the amounts, it doesn't say here, but just looking last month, it was 25,000, now we're 30. And that, again, I'm just asking, so basically, once, now that the airport's kind of up and running, this will be more of a monthly, or could be more of a monthly thing.
Possibly, I think what the mayor said, if there's a demand, we'll be.
But this is a, yeah, so.
That's a good thing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the more we see that, the more money we're making.
Right, and that's fine, I'm just clarifying so I understand that that's something we'll probably be seeing more, and we want to see more, so that's good. I was just double checking that, so, the others are all the same as what they've been, so that's no big deal. I mean, the K and Lake and PHP, so I'm good on the rest, I was just curious about the others. So I move we approve unless someone else has something else to.
We have a motion on the table. Second by Councilman Baird, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, those are approved. Now reports, is there anything pressing from any of the councilmen?
I had just one question, the animal shelter, do we have a follow-up on the evaluation or the?
So where we're at right now is the investigation's pretty much wrapped up. All the information has been given to the attorney over in Duchesne, and they're going over that information to make.
So we should have that by next council to have some sort of report.
I would believe so, yeah.
I'm just curious, because I know that's definitely on our radar now after the last meeting. I was actually at the school talking to somebody that asked about council, and some kid came up and heard me talking, and, oh, they're doing a terrible job and this and that. And, well, they're doing a terrible job at, the city is, and he was blaming the city for stuff, and it's a teenager, they just know what they hear, and I get that, and I just was hoping that we could get this wrapped up and get the information out so we can then address that and move on, you know what I'm saying? And I know mistakes happen, I'm not, I just want to clear it up and let's move forward. I know that's on Scott's radar, we talked a little bit Friday.
Well, and it'll be, the investigation and everything will be done. However, the policies and procedures will be on your watch. So, implementing a lot of that
Right.
will come from that investigation. And so we'll get that done as quickly as possible.
But I was impressed with Scott in our discussion Friday night, because he mentioned that he's already been working with someone that runs an animal shelter out that way, so that he could start on board getting some ideas and planning to, and I think that's what we need to address, is to make sure it's run efficiently, and both for cost for the community, but also for the safety of the animals and the safety of the community. So I want, like I said, I think it caught us all off guard, and it's unfortunate that it wasn't dealt with through proper channels, and it kind of got out there. Like you said before, there's a lot of misinformation, and I feel like if there's been some mistakes that happen and we need to make an apology to, people, I think we should consider if that's something we need to do. And I'm not saying we do, I'd like to make sure we first have all the information before we do that.
I think, yeah, and we can look at that when it comes. And that's why I didn't offer an apology that night.
Right, I agree
Because
with that.
From what I've seen, really Roosevelt City hasn't done anything close to even what we've been accused of.
Right.
And so the apology would then come from those that that put the misinformation out. And so I had a really hard time having Roosevelt City apologize when everything that we've said and everything that we've gotten out there to the public has been, I mean, we've all agreed on it. It's been gone through with a fine tooth comb. I mean, it's been the best information that we could provide. So, but were there some things that could have been done a little bit differently? Possibly, but they're minute, and I don't mind apologizing for those
Right.
things. So, but yeah,
No, and I agree 100% there that we did apologize, and I think we need to get all the information first, figure out, and then
yeah,
proceed from that information. So I agree with that.
and it should be soon. So, we didn't have a chance to meet with Grant today, but we will next week, and I'm sure we'll have a good update. And it's close. I talked to him and he said that it's really close.
That's good to know. That was the only thing I was asking about, or concerned about.
Any other major issues, concerns, or things we need to discuss tonight? Kurt, do you have anything for us?
Just one thing. I'll just come up here. I was speaking with the city manager of another municipality, and there's some concern that this third tranche of the CARES Act money,
Oh, yeah.
the state may possibly reallocate that. I think there's a lot of pressure from the Wasatch Front. Why do you give the rural counties as much? Why? Because they haven't been affected with the numbers of COVID cases. But we also are unemployment.
We were smarter in how we implemented that strategy. And so why not reward the ones that did a better job?
There was a ULCT board meeting today concerning this.
Yeah.
And they will take their recommendations to the lawmakers
Okay.
and it was, I mean,
Is there anything we can do, because I know he brought this up to me, is there anything we can do as a city or as a mayor and council? Or is it already kind of handled through the other channels?
they've talked with Salt Lake County and those bigger areas that are saying they have a higher need. But they've also talked to cities like Moab and Park City who are affected way more than what their actual resident population is responsible for. So they take that all into consideration and they're taking their recommendation from the board. There were several different scenarios and different options, but they're trying to help get that worked out the fairest way possible.
So you think we may not get any, or it may be, we don't know until they.
I think it's, you would probably know better than us.
And I don't have all the details of what to expect, and they're obviously just trying to put the pressure on to try to get it to work out right.
I'd like to just mention, I really appreciate Dustin's service there on that board. And that's been really helpful in our meetings and the close contact that we've had with them and that information, bring that back. So thank you for what you're doing with that. And that's a big deal being on that board, so.
And that's why, as we've talked in the past, we've spent less than what we've received. Of the CARES Act money, we've received about $412,000, and we've spent about 370 of that. But we're not going to spend anything more until we get it in pocket. We're not going to obligate anything.
Well, I have a bank account. I'll give you the number.
I have to work with the city manager on that.
So he's gonna take his share.
Well, I'm just gonna delegate that back under right.
I'll make comments because you just came out of a situation where I won't say anymore, but okay.
And one last thing, and you already mentioned it, just like to recognize Carolyn for her many years of service to the city, and
Yeah.
we're excited for her. We're gonna miss her, but we're excited.
So tell us the skinny, Carolyn, first of all, it is unique to have you sitting here in the audience and we're grateful you're here tonight. So what are your nearsighted plans, far-sighted plans?
The nearsighted plans is basically just go back out and help my mom since she gets better.
Gotcha. Well, I'm sure we'll see you around a little bit. You're not done yet. Are you?
Not till the end of the month.
And we're gonna have an opportunity to recognize her, and so
Well,
we share
good.
the council.
Well,
Everybody gets the invitation.
You know what, we need to get, will you make sure we get a plaque for the next council
Please
meeting?
no.
Yes.
I actually, no, I'm not a plaque person.
That's okay.
Nobody's a
Let's
black
get her-
person.
I
What's to do with that?
We've,
because,
Lee's on that.
no, I'm close enough to the end of my life that my kids will hear it and they'll go, throw it away, I don't know what to do.
We'll just hang it in here.
Seriously.
We're gonna get you something. Hey, I have a plaque when I was on the city council before, I don't even know where it's
Plant
at,
a
so you
tree
might
and
as well
name
have
it
one.
after me or something.
You might as well have one laying around
It's like a
somewhere.
frisbee golf thing for like the hole at the park.
That's a good idea.
Are you a frisbee golfer?
Yeah, the Wilkin Hall.
I'm really serious.
There'll be something.
I don't even have a place on the
Tell us again,
38
so everybody understands here, Hal was just saying that he had an 85th birthday coming up on Sunday. How many years have you been with the city?
I've been here 37 years and I'm in my 30th.
That's a long tenure. And thank you.
You know,
for
I've seen a lot. There's a lot of
That's why she's quit. She's like, I can't deal with this new man.
Carolyn, it's tough to take compliments, and I have a neighbor that's half my age that wanted to do something for me. I said, Nick, I can get that. He said, how can I reap my blessings if you don't let me serve you?
Let me interpret that. You're getting a plaque. All right, well, if there's not, is there anything else?
Give her a lamp with a plaque on it.
Lava lamp. If they're not,
I'll move we adjourn.
okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Second? We're staying until we get a second.
Nobody wants to
It's
jump.
Vince's turn.
Second, you're up.
I'll second.
All right, we'll consider
I'm just
ourselves.
trying to move things along. If I can get those motions, then we can move things along.